Yes, we are live.
Okay, thanks, Prince. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's session with Abhijeet Saikia. Abhijeet will talk about flood mitigations, one of the biggest problems that we have had in Assam and many other parts of India, but Assam, it has been a perennial problem that we have seen. Just to introduce you to Abhijeet, Abhijeet is a chartered manager and a member of Chartered Management Institute, United Kingdom, and a chartered engineer and member of civil engineers. Abhijit has many years of experience, almost a decade of experience in flood mitigation and flood defenses in United Kingdom, and he has worked across Europe and South Asia. Here is Abhijit, an expert on flood mitigation and also on power supply, talking to us. One of the reason Abhijit wanted to join this voluntary platform and wanted to contribute, much like many of you do, is that he's from Tejpur and his childhood has a very bitter, or you may say, uh, experience where flooding was normal. He used to travel in buses where the roads were flooded. So his schooling, all his life, he has experienced that, and he has also known that nothing much happens. We have accepted this as a part of life until he realized that there are ways that we can really manage floods and it need not be what it is. And I remember in this context a very, very nice book that I have read a couple of times, written by P. Sainath. Everybody loves a good drought, a book written on drought basically, and what I also call everybody loves a good flood. There is a lot of money, there is no accountability, and there is ample evidences from us states like Assam and Bihar that why we don't construct something permanent that we can avoid the floods. And with that introduction, I will invite Abhijit to make his presentations, and then after the presentations, we will go for a question answer sessions. But three things before Abhijit takes over the platform and starts on his presentation. Abhijit, this has been a perennial problem in Assam, probably since independence, prior to independence, and continues. Why do we as a public, as citizens, never been very vocal? You look at Corona, less than 100 deaths in Corona in Assam, and the whole world is talking. We have more than 200 deaths in floods this year alone, and but there is not much talk about it, not much discussion, not much strategy. The amount of strategic time given for Corona, and if you uh, juxtapose that with flood, it seems that flood is not a problem at all. We have accepted this as part of life. Secondly, what prevents us from designing things that floods can be prevented? And we as community, how can we contribute it? How can the community model system, which has worked in water harvesting greatly, it has also worked in Europe in many communities on flood prevention, but hasn't happened in India or much in Asia. So we'd like that you run us through these three questions and all the additional experiences that you have had as an international expert in flood mitigations. Welcome, Abhijit. The floor is yours.
Sanjay, thanks very much. First of all, for inviting me on this platform. And also, I would like to congratulate Anajuri for doing such a good work. It's really helping many, I'm sure, and it will going to help many in the future. So in the next half an hour or 40 minutes, I think what I have got, I'm going to go through three key questions. As Sanjay said, why floods? What it is that causing floods from so many years? What we can do and what we can do at our individual level to prevent flood or to do something which can mitigate flooding. So I'm going to share my screen if it's possible to go through a few slides which I have presented in next or last week. That's all I got to build these slides. Let me try to share this screen with you. Um, Sorry, I'm not that much familiar with Zoom.
There's a share screen button, and you'll be seeing a couple of slides.
Okay,
You have to select one of them.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have got around 25 slides. We have with some examples of flooding and some mitigation measures and some good practices. So let me start. And again, thank you for inviting me. Flooding. I think it's so common in Assam. I think everyone has seen flooding, directly or indirectly impacted by flooding, or had lost someone near or far due to flooding, which is really painful. But flooding, as we all see, is a very complex natural phenomena, and it is dependent on many factors, which I'm going to discuss in next 30 minutes. But flood affects nearly 40% of the Assam area every year, which is sad, and we really need to do something about it. The first thing we can do is create public awareness or general awareness so that we raise our voice. As Sanjay said, we need to bring this topic and we need to discuss this so that some action is done or taken. Uh, Let me go to the next slide. This is a general disclaimer because I'm presenting this only for educational and awareness purposes and not for any personal benefit or any other benefits, completely voluntary. Floods. Why floods and what causing floods every year? There are two key things that's causing floods. One is natural factors and another is human induced factors. Natural factors like meteorological causes, geomorphic and hydrological causes, and human induced causes, which I'm going to discuss in detail because these are the ones which we can stop, we can improve, or we can do something which can, in long run, prevent floods. So, the natural causes, mainly there are two key causes subdivided into parts like meteorological causes and geomorphic hydrological causes. Meteorological causes are very natural, as everyone knows, like heavy rainfall, melting of ice, glaciers, similar kind of things, which we have little or very less control over. Geomorphic and hydrological causes, similar to meteorological, these are natural causes, but to some extent, we have some control over them, and these are caused by some of our actions, directly or indirectly. So, Assam, the location of Assam, the topography of Assam, and geography of Assam is very peculiar. And one of the reason we have more floods because of our geography and topography. I have done a slide here. You can see a few typical sections through Assam, and you can see Assam is a very flat uh, valley, and because of this, it's similar to your floor or table. If you spill something or if you put some water, it will flow anywhere or go too far, compared to in a sloping ground where you know the water will flow in one direction. So that is one of the problem Assam has. As soon as there is a overflow of river, it goes in any direction, and we have very little control over it. But we would like to have control over it, which I am going to discuss. So going back again, the next some of the another causes are natural causes are like channel migration, gradual movement of the river. So I have another example here. This is a or tributary of Brahmaputra, and you can see, yeah, yeah, sorry, I'm just facing a little bit trouble with Zoom. Yeah, if you can see here, if you have built a house, say in 1984, in this part of or the upper bank of this tributary, by 2020, your house would have been in the middle of Brahmaputra or the tributary of Brahmaputra. This is because the river is shifting over time. So in 30 years, the river has moved significantly by nearly a kilometer. So that's a significant movement of river, and we have no control over it. That's a natural process. And again, it's attributing to flooding. We can do something about it. Mentoring growth, which I'm not going to discuss in detail. Rapid change of river course. This is because of many reasons: silt deposit, earthquake, landslides, and many other factors. Elevation of riverbed is one of another key problem because of the sediment deposit in the riverbeds. The rivers are losing its capacity to carry water, and then landslides, avalanches, and earthquakes contributing to elevation of the riverbed and rapid change of the river course, which is contributing to flooding again. Another thing which is missed out in many times is congestion at the mouth of the river, because this all tributaries bring a lot of silt and sediments along it, and it gets deposited at the mouths of the river. And what happens when it actually congests the mouth of the river. It actually restricts the flow of water from the tributaries to the main river, and because of this water backflows and floods. So these are some of the natural causes, which I'm not going into great extent, but I will be discussing more into the human induced factors, because these are the key things which we will be able to change. So what are human induced factors that are causing floods? First, I will read out all this and explain a little bit. Then I will show you some examples, because examples will make it easier for understanding. Poorly engineered construction activities and lack of coordination. This is very common in Assam and across India, where departments do not talk to each other, do not consider flooding while constructing things, do not consider impact of the construction activities on the environment in short term and in long term. So that needs to be changed, and to change this we need to bring awareness. I will show you an example what has happened in one of the very important uh, uh, wetland or a water reservoir or a lake, which is outside Guwahati. It's Diporbil. So what I have done is I've taken a satellite image from 1984 and a satellite image for 2020. You can see a vast difference there. So the lake has shrunken to almost half in over 30 years, around 25 to 30 years. What has happened? We think this has caused by natural phenomena, but I would disagree, and I try to say this has happened because one of our um, action, that is construction of this railway embankment through the middle of this lake in 1995 or 1996. So what has happened because of this embankment? It has changed the flow of water from the left side of the lake to the right side, and slowly the lake to on the right side has dried up or rapidly dried up over years. And since it's dried, now people start living in it. So if you see in the image here in 2020, it's all populated area. People have houses, buildings, commercial establishment in those areas now, which was once a lake. And this has happened mainly because of this dam or embankment which was created by railway. That is one thing what I would like to say is doing engineering is like a product. A product should be fit for purpose and should be good for customers, but it should also at the same time good for the environment, and in long term it should help the sustainable development of the community or sustainable development of the environment. So this dam is fit for purpose. It is helping millions in terms of using the railway, but what it has done to the environment is pretty sad. So when we design, when we build something, we need to think what implications it will have in long run. Another example I would like to show is a bridge which was recently inaugurated. This is the Bogeybill Bridge. If you see in 1984, the satellite image, the width of the river was 7.5 kilometer. The construction started and they built and inaugurated the bridge recently. But what has changed since then is the width of the river has came down from 7.5 kilometer to 4.75 kilometer. Why has happened this? Because to build this bridge, the authority has reclaimed the river to build the embankment or approach for the bridge. The bridge is very good, well engineered, it fits for purpose, helping a lot of people traveling from one side of Brahmaputra to another side. But what has not been thought of is what are the implications on the long run on the hydrology of the area. So I suspect what will happen in long run because of the restricted width of the river, the water will backflow and it will accelerate or it will increase flooding in the areas. So this is another thing which we have to be very careful while designing or engineering infrastructure. How it's going to affect us in terms of environment in long run. So we might save something in here by not building a bridge longer enough to allow the 7.5 kilometer width. But what we will be spending a lot more now in flood protection, and also a lot of people will be suffering because of decisions like this. I'm not saying this is the only bad example, but there are many, and I'm not going to or not doing this to criticize anything. But what I'm trying to say is we have to think about the future, how it's going to affect the environment or topography or the hydrology or any other implications it will have on the life of the people. So I will go again and show this. Then another issue is stone quarries in the hill slopes. This is very common. Many mining activities are going on in many places in Assam, mainly in the hill slopes. And this is actually helping erosion, and that's finally helping in flooding. Another thing which is key is mining sand and gravel from the riverbed. I want to show this example again. So what happens is in a natural river, the gravel protects the soft part of the riverbed and it sustains the vegetation and the banks. What happens if you score out or if you take out the gravels, it will expose the softer particles to the river and then river washes away this sediments. And what happens is because of this river underscores the roots and finally leads to failure of the river banks, which again causes floods. So these are something we need to think about when we are allowing mining activities in the river, because it might be good for short term, but it will have long term negative implications. Another there are a lot. So there's another key cause, which is a human action, is development of infrastructure, road building, township, etc., in isolation, without considering the impact of on the environment and hydrology. As I have shown two examples, we need to consider its impacts on the environment and hydrology. Any design should not happen in isolation for the purpose of meeting the requirement, or as I said, fit for purpose, but not benefiting the environment or the hydrology. Then encroachment of floodplains, because our population is increasing and there are a lot of uh, um, I would say people coming in from various parts into Assam and settling in, taking the floodplains, and that's again directly affecting um, the flooding or the extent of flooding. Then destruction of wetlands, it is again another cause where people are reclaiming wetlands and building houses, commercial establishments, or roads or bridges. And this is one subject which not my subject, but this is again adding to flooding, deforestation, afforestation. So we should be very clear when we are planting something. Some plants are good to retain water and some are not. And same way, if you are cutting trees, it leads to erosion and finally leads to uh, flooding. And then change in agricultural practices. I'm going to discuss it later, like terrace agriculture and then shifting agricultural practices, which we need to consider moving from shifting agricultural practices to terrace agricultural practices. I have some examples I will show you. So one of the examples before I move to the next section is ad hoc construction of embankments or ad hoc flood mitigation measures. What happens? We try to save one area, and that actually leads to risking many other parts of the country or of the state or of the district. So here is an example. If you see this football on the picture on the left, this football field is in the natural floodplain. Now to save this football field, one has decided to build an embankment here. So what has happened? Because of this embankment, the football field here, the area here is safe from flooding, whereas what has happened because of this, the flow on the river has increased, the velocity has increased, causing flooding in the residential areas here. So we need to think carefully what we are doing, what we are saving, and what implication it will have downstream. So any activity in the upstream of the river will have a lot of negative implications downstream. So we have to be very careful while designing or while engineering flood mitigation measures. So this next slide, this is a key slide, or I would say a key thing to understand that our actions are directly or indirectly responsible for recent increase in flooding. It's because our actions leads to natural phenomena that causes flooding, and our actions directly causes flooding. So uh, we are, and some or other way are responsible for floods. And if we change our actions, it will actually improve the situation in Assam. So I'm going to discuss some key control measures, but before that, I would like to ask if anyone has got any questions on this causes of flooding. If not, then I will move on, but I will pause for 2 minutes or a minute.
I have, I have a, I have a question.
Yes, Milan.
When you say that, um, there should be plants, next to the what do you call, the river or the shoreline. Shoreline should be covered, right? Is that correct? By trees or grass.
Yes, because trees or planting trees helps
Yeah,
reducing the
yeah,
erosion and
yes,
finally helps mitigating flood. But we have
yes,
to be very careful what trees we are planting because, as I said, some plantation are helpful in retaining soil
yeah.
and helps in infiltration of water, whereas some are doing the just opposite thing.
So if you see most of the shoreline, whether it's the Majuli, if you take the ferry from Jorhat to Majuli or anywhere, you will see all the shoreline to be naked in Assam. I don't see, there's no rule over here that the ground should be covered. You know, do you have any idea why it's that? Why there's no, the shoreline are so empty, naked?
Um, few reasons. I cannot answer this directly or straight because it's a difficult question to answer why. But most of the private lands, it is responsible of the owner of the land what they are doing on those lands. And in government lands, I would say there needs to have a policy by the government, or government should bring up some policies or try to do something to plant trees because planting definitely arrests erosion and in long term helps reducing flooding. So there is a need of policy change or some actions from the administration or uh, from the local municipal corporations or the local villages to plant trees.
They're seeing it for almost 70, 80 years that the land are, landsliding is happening. Even the houses are getting, falling down into, river and stuff like that. But I don't see anything happening. But anyway, that's my point of view. But
Yeah, I think that is what I said. We need to bring public awareness such that questions are asked. Like you are asking this question to me. If everyone starts asking this question, definitely it will go into the right ears and then some actions are taken. But for that, I think we need to bring this awareness so that everyone knows why it's happening and what can be done. And I think this presentation is going to help if people are looking at this.
thank you. Hopefully there will be, because people watch the video afterward also to the ability. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, Milind. Anybody else has got any questions?
Yeah, I would say go ahead. We'll have the question answer session at the end. Maybe that will
Okay.
be more.
Okay, then. I will go to the next section. These are control measures. What I'm trying to do in the next slides or next section is try to share some of the good practices which will help mitigating flood. But mainly, flooding can be mitigated. It cannot be completely resolved or stopped because it's a natural process, but it can be reduced, significantly reduced by taking right measures. So some of the way you can control flooding is by storage and controlling the runoff. Storage means storing runoff water and the controlling the runoff, and capacity, creating or increasing the water carrying capacity of the rivers, streams, and channels. These are the two key things we can do to control flooding. But I'm going to discuss this in detail in the next slides. What are these? So storage and controlling runoff, how you are going to do this? There are various ways to do this by creating dams and reservoirs, then runoff attenuation, reinstating and reconnecting, and agricultural practices, that is changing agricultural practices. So how we resolve by dams and reservoirs? It's evident and many places where large dams and reservoirs or micro dams, check dams and reservoirs has helped storing water and then helping in controlling floods. Whereas I'm not very fond of large dams and reservoirs because they have significant negative impacts, I would say, on the environment, ecology, and demography of the area. Sometimes I would say it changes the demography of the area, large dams and reservoirs. So what I would, as a person, recommend is going for number of micro dams, check dams, and reservoirs instead of large dams, because micro dams, check dams, and reservoirs are far more or has very less impact on the environment compared to large dams. Then runoff attenuation. Runoff attenuation is a methodology which is um, used by most of the Western countries or the American countries, and it is very efficient way of controlling flood. There are various ways to attenuate the runoff. Some of what I am going to discuss here are creating ponds and lakes, attenuation tanks and crates, converting floodplains into natural reservoirs to store and control flow of water, maximize infiltration areas, and use of sustainable urban drainage system. Sustainable urban drainage system is a methodology which is widely adopted throughout Europe and the UK. I will again discuss this in next slides. Reinstate and reconnect. Again, this is another natural way of preventing or controlling flood. Reconnecting existing rivers uh, to natural floodplains and wetlands. As I have shown this slide earlier, when water goes into the natural floodplains, it actually controls the flow or velocity of the water, and that actually prevents flooding. And agricultural practices. So it is common in the hill areas of Assam where people are doing shifting cultivation. What happens with shifting cultivation is they clear one area, they do farming in that area and then move on. What happens? It leads to erosion and deforestation, which actually causes flooding. But if we can help these people to move uh, from shifting agriculture to terrace cultivation, then we would be able to create storage in a natural way and control the runoff. So I'm going to show few slides here. If you yeah, so this is one prime example of a terraced cultivation. You can clearly see here how water is stored nicely, and in the event of a heavy rainfall, the water will flow slowly from one step to the other and then going to the river instead of a rush of water into the river, which will cause peak in the rivers, causing flooding. So let me go through these examples now one by one, as I have discussed here. Check dams and reservoirs. So these are some of the examples taken from across the world and India, which has helped areas in controlling flood. This on the left, top left, is from UK, and this bottom left or bottom right is from India, and this one from Bangladesh. So these are some of the methodologies adopted across the world to control flooding. Whereas if you go to Assam, you hardly see many control or check dams. Whereas if you go to states like Madhya Pradesh or Rajasthan, the check dams and micro dams are very common, and they are able to manage drought by doing this. And in Assam, I'm pretty sure, using this methodology, we would be able to somehow control flooding. I can discuss this in detail, but as this is another subject to discuss, it will take another hour. So I'm limiting the technicalities of it. Retention ponds. Retention pond is widely used across Europe and in the developing countries. It also helps in landscaping and beautification of the area. At the same time, it is very efficient in holding water and releasing in a controlled way, and finally controlling flooding. So this is another way we should explore to control flooding in Assam. Attenuation tanks, as I discussed earlier, or crates. This is again widely used in developed countries, in urban areas where you have restricted space to build big ponds or lakes. So these are underground tanks which can store huge lot of water and release slowly so that you won't flood the river system or streams or the drainage system. And this is very effective, and studies has shown very good results of using attenuation tanks, and it's widely used in the developing countries, as I said. Again, another topic, big topic to discuss, so I'm just showing you a few examples here. And the sustainable urban drainage system. This is a methodology which is a requirement in Europe, and what it is sustainable way to develop the drainage system as close as to the nature. So what um, it includes many things like infiltration basins, detention ponds, soakways, infiltration tracks, green roofs, filter strips, or creating wetlands, and also using pervious pavements. So this is a methodology for drainage and development which is adopted in the developing countries, and I think this should be pushed through by the government or the authorities, or we should ask, or we should try to educate people of benefit of using sustainable urban drainage system, because flooding in Guwahati is mainly because of the surface water runoff, and this definitely can be controlled or improved by use of sustainable urban drainage systems. And then, as I said earlier, control measures of one of the control measure is creating wetlands. This is an example from US. Millen might be knowing about this. So this was a wetland originally. Then it dried up because of human activities and development. And then the local authority decided to spend a lot of money on this to convert this wetland once dried to wetland again. So you can see this picture here. In March 2001, it was all dried up and it was reinstated by 2012. So that was a big achievement, and I'm pretty sure we can do this in a lot of places in Assam, because I remember when I was young, I can see a lot of wetlands when I was traveling through Assam, and same areas now have no water in there. People are living around those wetlands. Once there were wetlands, now they're dry lands, and also they are doing farming on those wetlands. So that's another way of controlling flood. Then creating capacity. I haven't got a lot of examples for this, but some of the key ways you can control flooding is by creating capacity of the river system. This can be done by building embankments, as the government is doing at a lot of places. But what I would say is it has to be engineered appropriately and designed carefully such that it is not affecting the areas downstream or upstream. And reactivating the distributaries. When I say reactivating the distributaries, these are dried up distributaries. So we should try to connect those distributaries to the river, and building new canals to add capacity. This is very common practice in any other country and also in some parts of India, but not visible in Assam. Then clearing. This is a common sense. So any blocked river tributaries or drainage channels should be cleared of debris such that the river or the channel or the stream can run at its capacity. Then dredging. Dredging is a controversial subject again, but there are examples and there are scientific evidences that dredging helps reducing floods, and it's adopted in many of the Western countries, including US and Canada. So, but what I would say is when someone is deciding to dredge a river, they should also consider that sustainable ways of dredging is adopted, and also they should consider how best and to what depth this activity should take place so that it have no negative impact in the areas surrounding the river downstream and upstream, because if you dredge the river in Assam, it might have implication in West Bengal or in Bangladesh. So when somebody is planning dredging, they should think of the whole river system as one instead of dredging one river on one stream, because these are all interconnected. So I came to end of the next section, and I'm still on the flood control measures. And finally, what I would say is the final measure is maintenance. And I do not want to say much about it. I just want to show this picture, which demonstrates what happens if you are not maintaining appropriately. So on the picture on the left, you see it's a nice running river, and there's no maintenance. What has happened to it? It has become uh, a dumping zone, and you hardly can see any water. And I've seen this happening in many places in Bangalore earlier, but I'm pretty sure if we are not maintaining our rivers and not doing anything about removing the debris, then finally we end up in similar situation. So the key question, what is the solution? A solution to this flooding, never-ending flooding, and problem people are facing from decades. What I would say is there's no one solution. The solutions comes from different mitigation measures. As I explained, there are various control measures like dredging, clearing, reactivating, embankments, agricultural practices, reinstating and reconnecting, runoff attenuation, dams and reservoirs, and finally maintaining. So we will have, or the people in Assam and the administration and the government has to think of utilizing all of these together in proportion to control flood. Using just one mitigation method will not solve the problem or will help anyone. It has to be proportionately utilized, including maintenance, uh, to, to find a solution for flooding. Again, as I said, these all areas will need further research, policy implementations, and also there's a need for the government or the organizations to make the modern and sustainable technologies available to the contractors or builders such that they are able to utilize. And also there's a need to educate the contractors or builders such that they use the right technology or right methodology. And most important, there is need of better coordination between various departments. As I've shown an example earlier, a railway bridge could have far a negative impact on the environment than positive effect it's creating on the human life. So I am ending this section, control measures, and will again pause for a minute if anyone has any questions. I will take questions at the end, but any questions on this sections I will take, and I will pause for a minute.
Just one very basic thing.
Yes, Sanjay.
What are the key differences between a urban flood and a rural flood? Because when there is a rural flood, we don't hear much, but there is a lot of hue and cry if there's an urban flood.
Um, it's again a difficult question, but the answer is, if I have to say, in urban areas, there are more people, and there are more influential people living in the urban areas who has the connections and the right voice, whereas in rural areas, people are not heard because they do not have the right connections and they are not influential. That is one of the reason why you see more noise when there is a flooding in the urban areas and flooding in rural areas. But what causes the flooding? Most of the flood in urban areas like Guwahati is purely because of human action and surface runoff. Whereas flooding in the rural areas, where my slides are mainly for flooding in the rural areas. The flooding in rural areas mainly caused by all the things I have discussed here earlier, like I'll go to like natural and human-induced factors, like meteorological causes, demographical and hydrological causes, and then human causes. Is that answers your question? Or
I mean, I was looking more from the perspective of like what causes this flood. I mean, one understands that influential communities live in urban areas, but is it just pure construction and human-induced activities that leads to it, or are there other regions that an urban area suffers?
the urban, if you're asking about urban areas, mainly if I talk about Guwahati, it's suffering because of our actions, the construction activities, and the lack of drainage system. So, and as I said, I have shown you earlier this picture here of Dipor Bill, which was once kilometers and then shrunken to half of its size. Again, reduces the water storing capacity, and which again adds to flooding. And the urban areas are more impermeable because we are concreting everywhere instead of trying to have permeable surfaces, planting trees. Uh, if you see here, I've talked about SUDS, a sustainable urban drainage system. So if we are to solve the problem in the urban areas, we have to use sustainable urban drainage systems where we have more permeable areas, more green lands, more water retaining bodies than what we have now. If you see a prime example in Guwahati, you will see a lot of concreted areas, very less green areas. What happens, it adds up to the surface runoff. You are unable to arrest water. The surface infiltration is to minimum, and all the rainwater coming from the neighboring hills or in the same location has nowhere to go rather than to flood the area, because water finds its way to the rivers or to the ground. And if you are blocking the area, it will cause flooding.
Yeah.
Is, is that helps?
Yes, Abhijit, definitely. Yes, participants, the floor is open for you to question Abhijit.
Oh no, I have few more slides before I finish. Um, just three more slides.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Am I running out of time or are we okay? Okay. So I have a few more slides, and this is what we can do at individual level. This is mainly for rural population, where people are experiencing flood every year. So what we can do at individual level, I would say avoid building in flood prone areas where possible. If not at all, you have to build in flood prone areas, then build above the maximum predicted flood level. Then one will question how to get this maximum predicted flood level. I think it should be responsibility of the government to provide these figures to every individual, such that when you are planning a house or a building, you know what are the flood levels. I would say do not obstruct natural path of water. Water finds its way, as I said earlier. So if you obstruct it, it will find its way um, to you. So allow, if you are not able to do something without obstructing the water path, then allow a suitable alternative path for the water to flow. Avoid concreting or paving free spaces. As I said earlier, maximize permeable areas, build green areas, plant trees, herbs and shrubs. Provide sufficient drainage to allow water to go out post flooding. Utilize such principles if possible. That's applicable for urban areas mainly. Where possible, plant trees and shrubs. As I said, this helps in resting erosion and also increase infiltration. Uh, if you're building in a flood prone area, then be ready, because you are doing knowing there would be flood. So keep a provision for assessing via boat or alternative means of access. Uh, if you see on the right, there are a few pictures. These are sanghar or stilt houses once used by people of Assam, and these are really effective if you're building in flood prone areas. And I'm sure there was a good reason why people in the past used to live in these houses in flood prone areas. So what I would say is do not force to change the nature, but to adopt to the nature, and that is how we can survive flooding. So next slide is some examples across the world how people are adopting to flood and building in flood prone areas without obstructing the flow of water. So this picture on the right, if you see, these are again similar to Sanghar, but they have a very nice way of accessing their houses in flood event, and their houses are or huts are built well above the flood heights. Similar way, this is a I think this is in Cambodia, and again modern housing in flood prone area, and they have adopted to flooding because they expect flood to happen every year. So you can see that the buildings are above flood height. This building on the left, you will be surprised, this is from India. Again, it's from Kerala and the floodplains of the backwaters. And again, they have adopted, they predicted flood will happen. So they build these houses above the floodplain. These are some modern houses in US, and this is coastal flooding. And again, they're building houses above maximum flood heights. And this figure you see on the bottommost is from UK. Again, they faced coastal flooding and they adopted to it. Uh, my point of saying is we should adopt ourselves to the nature instead of trying to change the nature. So this is my final and concluding slide. This well representative, these two pictures. The picture on the left is high school, which keeps on flooding every year. And this picture on the right is a similar educational institute in the West, which has adopted to flooding. So choice is ours or yours. I would say don't force the nature, adopt and build around it. And that is how we are going to survive flooding. Thank you. And I'm open for any questions now.
Thank you, Abhijit. That's very, very enlightening. I mean, one very comprehensive account of what goes in a flooding and how we can all contribute to it, not just the individual, but also the government and experts. Participants, welcome to the question and answer session. You can also write your question on the chat box. Or Priyansu, you can also post the questions which are there on the Facebook Live so that I can read it out for Abhijit. Abhijit, people say that in India our engineering is not all that bad. They do know what to be done or what has to be done and how it can be done. What are the reasons that more recently, if we look at Chennai, Mumbai, if we look at even Guwahati nowadays, very recently, like just last month, I saw Dibrugarh completely flooded. While if I remember correctly, way back in 2000 and earlier in the 90s, Dibrugarh never, the city never had a flooding problem. So, is there something more that we are not able to understand flooding, or is it that what I call the governance deficit? You understand, but you love the flood because then there is a lot of money coming in, and then there is no accountability. You spend as you wish. So, can like a conspiracy theorist, can it is it a problem that let the problem be so the money keeps coming or the money keeps flowing like water?
Yeah, no, that's a conspiracy theory, but I know the intention of the government is very good, and they are very supportive for the people, and they are trying their best to help mitigating or controlling the floods. But I think the problem is not just one; there are many, because our engineering practices or the engineering practices in India is such that we want to build or we want to create something which is only for that purpose, and we do not think about the implications it will have on the environment or the hydrology, or it will impact the lives of people in long run. A prime example was the railway embankment created through Bogi or Dipur bill. So that is fit for purpose, that helps people are happy, but nobody when building that has thought that in long run it is going to create such a difference and will actually will be responsible for shrinking the lake to half, which is today causing a lot of flood problems. Similar way, not only that, while you're developing commercial or residential establishment, you do not think about how you are impacting the environment, how your actions is going to affect the neighborhood. What you are doing, you're engineeringly doing it perfect for the purpose. We are creating a residential complex. It's very nice, it's very good, it's luxurious for the people staying there, but you don't think what will happen, what it is going to do to the neighborhood, to the hydrology, how you are discharging your water. There's no plan, no guidance from the government, or no clear policies uh, which is sustainable enough uh, to support controlling floods. That is what I would say. Those are the reasons, because our engineering is very much focused on delivering uh, the purpose instead of looking at its implication in long run on the environment and also the neighborhood.
Let me ask you the same question another way.
Yeah.
Given a second chance to rebuild the same bridge in Dipperville for the same purpose, do you think that an engineer can do the same job at the same place without disturbing the environment and long-term negative impacts?
Yeah, so as I said, the engineers or whoever is developing the bridge should think about how they will construct this bridge sustainably without affecting the environment in long run. So if you have to construct the same bridge today, they will construct in the same way they have done in the last 10 years, because hardly there is any significant change in policy. So there are change in policy recently, but at ground level, you do not see any change because they are not implemented well. So there's need of policy change that will force you to think about the future, think about the environment. At the same time, this policy needs to be implemented at ground level. Building a policy on the books will not help unless and until it's implemented. So your question, if you're building something last 10 years and you're building it today, it will nearly be the same because there's hardly any significant change in policy or any significant implementation of the policy, even if it is policies are made.
Well, anybody else from the group, if you have any questions?
Can I come in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Abhijeet. That was a great presentation, and it's a very well-researched model, and trying to explain what happens, why it happens. I was just wondering. I mean, the way floods have become a perennial event for Assam. I was just wondering what are the critical areas as far as the state interventions are concerned, which we are currently lacking, because of which we have devastating effects of floods every year. So particularly speaking from a state intervention perspective, I want to know the critical areas or what are the lacuna, if you
The
could say
key,
that.
yeah, the key thing is lack of coordination between divisions and departments. If you're building a bridge, you're building for the purpose of carrying a railway or vehicles. But then there's no coordination between the flood control department with whoever is building the bridge. Uh, and that's where the problem lies, because they build a bridge, as I said, for the purpose without thinking about what implication it will have on the flooding that increases flooding. And also, I think what is needed from the government, because here in UK we have policies for everything, and you need to take consents from various departments to build anything. So if, for example, if I have to build a house anywhere in the UK, I have to go to various departments like environmental agency that looks after flooding. Then I have to go to the council. I have to go to uh, many other departments, but mainly I would like to say environmental agency that looks after how you're going to build it, how you're going to affect the environment, how you're going to discharge your water. Are you building in the floodplain? If you're building in the floodplain, have you considered flooding in your design? What have you done about your discharges, how we are going to impact the neighborhood or impact the hydrology in the long run? If you have not considered all those, then you will not get a consent. So there's no such system in Assam or in India where you have, while you build something, you consider all these activities and then you get a consent or an authority which looks after this. Because in India most of the things are bureaucratic instead of facilitating or helping. Because here what happens is, when I'm doing this and going to environment agency, they're trying to help me to get all this such that when I build a house I'm not flooded. But whereas in India, what happens is when you go to the authority, it's a procedure, like they are empowered to give you authority to build or not, instead of trying to help you build better things. And also there needs a lot of public awareness, and public awareness can only come when government actually tries to educate it through different programs. because it will not happen. I'm talking here or you're talking there. It will help to a certain level, but when it comes from the government, when governments try to educate people, try to spread the knowledge, it helps more, because you can see government is trying to help spreading the knowledge about COVID. So people are trying to keep social distancing. So why they can't do same thing for flooding? So this public awareness needs to be created. And as I said, a lot of policy change needs, like such sustainable urban drainage systems. Similar things should be added to the policy. And also how you design things, design dams, check dams or embankments. You need, what happens, example, as I shown earlier, you're protecting, say, Dibrugarh, and then you are building an embankment and government expending money to it. But they are, the department or the company or organization, whoever is building this embankment, needs to think about what implication it will have on the downstream or upstream. And there should be some kind of agency or some kind of um, uh, authority who advises, not controls, but advises or supports these organizations when they are doing some good thing for the public.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Anybody else? But the response Abhijeet you just gave to to her, now it seems that the new environmental impact assessment of government of India actually then looking backward, because it's trying to kind of clear everything, that you don't need multiple agency permissions to do anything. It is even doing away with the public consultations, which was an important part of the EIA process since it came into force. So that way we are going backward, and we are being more myopic in that sense. I'm not sure if you are aware of the new UIA rules that the government has released. So basically, like, it's a single window clearance, whether it is for mining or flood control or anything, building dams and hydro dams, anything. So it looks much more medieval than modern now.
Yeah, that if that is, I haven't read that and not sure what it is. But if that is the case, it's sad, because what you need is integrated effort. You need the experts, the public, to give their right suggestions, so that when you are building something, you go through that consultation process so that you get it right. Because without taking the opinion of the experts or the right authorities, will mean that you're repeating the same mistake you have done in the past, or increasing, getting it worse.
Right. Anybody else? Any questions? Priyanshu, do you have questions on the Facebook?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
You must be following Dihin Patkai, right? The whole thing that going about.
Yes,
Do
yeah.
you have any say about it, or how do you think it's going to affect flooding?
Yeah, as I said earlier, mining directly affects flooding, because you are losing the natural vegetation, and that actually accelerates erosion, and then erosion leads to flooding. And it's accelerated, or you're accelerating uh, the natural process of erosion by many times when you are taking out the vegetation cover. And mining cannot happen, or it's hard to say that mining will happen without affecting any forest or any vegetation in the area.
That's true. That's true. Any more questions? We have we have almost done an hour so far. So if there is no more questions, then I'll go ahead and probably request for the close of the session.
So, I mean,
I think I
okay.
think people will need time to digest all the information that you
Yeah.
have given. You know, there's lots of information, and people who are not engineers or in that line, I think it will take time to digest, and it will be great if you willing to accept question later on. I think the people can write it in Facebook, um, under the video they can post question, and we can compile all these question and get to you. Is that okay to you, Abhijeet?
Yeah, I'm always happy to help. As I said, I want like to bring public awareness, and what will happen is, if we spread the knowledge, people will make the right decision at any level, whether it's at individual level or at policy making level. But if we bring that awareness, I'm pretty sure at some time or some point we will see an end to this never-ending misery of flooding affecting millions of people or lives across Assam.
Okay.
And I'm happy to
And
take any questions at any time.
also, and I saw somewhere that if all the glaciers melted, then it shows that more than 50% of Assam will be underwater. Do you
Yeah,
have
I'm not.
some information about that, or
Uh,
global
I, I'm not
warming and its
sure
effect?
about that, but if all of the glaciers on Earth melts, I'm pretty sure it will be another ice age, and definitely it will be hard for survival of anyone on this Earth, not only Assam.
Yes. Thank you.
There is Nayanjit. He wants to say something.
Yeah, hi. My name is Nayanjit, and I'm a medical doctor and a public health specialist. Of course, all this knowledge is very new and refreshing to me at the same time. Um, well, from a public health perspective, I really cannot ask you an engineering question because I do not know anything about it. However, why I'm so interested in this particular topic is because I firmly believe, and also can back up with lots of scientific evidence, that most of the communicable diseases, even for today, even non-communicable diseases in the world, are somehow linked to environmental and climate change. So therefore, given the fact that many countries, including Bangladesh, have adopted significant engineering controls to prevent and control malaria and other vector-borne diseases. So I think it's very pertinent for Assam to now consider a more sort of a comprehensive solution to floods, as Mr. Abhijeet, you have sort of alluded to. And if not, I guess in the long run, as you have very clearly indicated, the cost of control measures is probably prohibitive, and it's going to be progressively more prohibitive in the long run post-COVID as well. So it's better that all departments and all concerned authorities and people work in consonance to address this. And that's where I guess the health as well as development could have the same ministry to function. So I just wanted to share that. And also I know that China is building some 18,000 plus dams across all its rivers that eventually lead to almost like 18 downstream countries, including India. So let's say if they construct all these dams, probably then all these countries will have more droughts than floods. So also, therefore, we need to be prepared for any eventualities in the long run from our environmental policy. Just wanted to make that point. If you have any reflections, that'd be great.
Yeah, I know you're right in saying that, Nayanjit, if I'm not wrong.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're right in saying so. And as I said, whatever policies are made, whatever engineering or design or flood mitigation measures government is implementing, or any individual organization is implementing, has to think about the implications in long run, and not designing just for immediate change, but how it will help or affect the lives in long run.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. With this, we come to the end of the session. And Thank you so much. Thank you so much, participants. It has been truly enlightening. We do have a question answer where people do post their questions on the Facebook or write to us, and then we pass it on to the speaker. So I hope once we get them, we'll be happy to respond to those individual questions. Thank you so much, and have a nice weekend, everybody.
Thank you very much.